This is Matt Brown, and you're listening to Just a Good Conversation. If you've seen a Home Depot, Kia, Delta Faucet, P.F. Chang's, or a Yeti commercial, you've seen Mark Thomas's work. A professional photographer who started scouting locations for additional work soon found himself behind the video camera. Always a team player, he became one of the best in the business at 24 frames a second.
I always say show up early and stay late. You just got to be in it, be a part of it, be aware of your surroundings. For me, the biggest thing was really telling myself, listen, it's not all about me. This job is not going to fall short just because of me. So if I stick with the team, we're all going to be a success. If I believe in the people I'm working with, we're going to be successful. And it's always turned out to be that way.
I'm Matt Brown, host of Just a Good Conversation. Take a listen to our archives. My guests have ranged from Emmy winners, college professors, authors, farmers, and Hall of Fame baseball coach George Horton.
I get parents out of the equation. I love parents, but I'm teaching them how to be their own men. If they're leaning on their parents to do their laundry, do their banking, to do their appointments, to ask the coach about playing time, they're not growing up.
The rest of my conversation with George can be found on our archives at justagoodconversation.com. Let's take a quick break for a sponsor before diving into my conversation with Mark Thomas. I am excited that I got Mr. Thomas on the podcast today. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. Like I said before we started, the way I found you was super interesting, working on that video for Yeti that you had with Wyman. That once I saw your name in the credit and I did some bio research and I found another Brookie, I was like, oh, I'm having this guy on. We're a dying breed.
Right on. Thanks. Good to be here.
Your bio and your body of work is so interesting. It's really, you're like in that, like I said, that sweet spot of generation where you went to Brooks to become a photographer, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's not how you are ending your career, which is fascinating.
No, not at all. I think I've had a very fortunate career. I think just the way, I went to go for one thing and it led me to another. So, it's been really, really interesting.
How did you find photography? Where did that snap for you?
Well, I got interested in photography, I think when I was like probably 12 years old.
Okay.
My dad had these cameras. My dad was in the Air Force. He did a lot of trips to Japan and back and stuff like that. And he always had these cameras. And I picked them up and I like just wandering around the neighborhood, going into the woods, taking pictures and stuff like that. And it was just kind of time spent by myself. And then, so I always had a fascination about, not only the image, but the technical part. I like the hardware, the camera, figuring out the exposures and stuff like that. So it was just something that I latched onto right away. And, of course, when I started going to concerts, I loved taking my camera to concerts and show my friends all the pictures. So I would get accolades from that. And, it was just kind of a cool thing.
Right.
That I was a part of. And so I started with that. And then I got into, once I got into high school and they offered a photography course, I had a really great instructor who was very enthusiastic about it, very encouraging and stuff like that. And that's when I first got into the darkroom and, to actually make that first 35 millimeter contact print and see it come up in the developer, I was just hooked from that point on, and just really wanted to figure out how to make this work and for my career. I knew this is what I wanted to do. Plus, I always loved traveling. You know, we moved around all the time as a kid, and I loved the new experiences. I wasn't afraid of it and all of that. So the combination, you know, I was like, well, photography could allow me to keep traveling. So it was one or the other, but it just so happened to be both. And so while I was in high school, that's when I first learned about Brooks Institute and the fact that there was a specialized photography school, and the fact that it was also accredited, which made my parents comfortable. You know, it was something that I could do. So I applied and got accepted. And
where were you living at the time?
I was living in San Antonio, Texas.
So halfway across the country for you to that god-awful place, Santa Barbara. Oh, such a dump.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I had taken a trip out there beforehand in advance to just kind of check out the school and stuff. And just, you know, the beach, the palm trees, you know, the whole thing. I was really excited. And then I didn't have a car or whatever, and I remember having to take a bus as far as I could go to get to the campus in Montecito, and then walking up there. I was just like, this is unreal, you know, this place.
Oh, yeah. Did you drive or fly into LAX? How did you get to Southern California?
I was road tripping
Whoa!
All the time. Oh, yeah. I had a little Subaru, 4-cylinder, two-door or whatever, just cut her out to California.
Oh, man, that must have been a road trip and a half. That must have been so much fun.
Oh, I loved it, you know, because it's all the west part of the United States. So that was always one of my favorite trips.
Yeah, and then going up the 101 and rolling into Santa Barbara in the early, would you probably go in late 70s? Oh, that must have been magical. Oh,
it was fantastic.
Yeah. If you had the Beach Boys playing, it would have been perfect.
Right. Jesus. I had to have been the Eagles at that point.
Or there you go.
The Eagles, Jackson Brown.
Little Hotel California is a roll into
exactly.
Goleta.
Exactly.
God.
So yeah.
So mom and dad were good. You're going to an accredited school and
going to accredited school. I got some. I was able to get some loans, and I was working. You know, so I made it happen that way.
Right.
Yeah. Then I got the Brooks. Yeah.
Do you remember who the high school teacher was? Who was that influential person?
Yeah, that was Mr. Tanner.
Mr. Tanner. Yeah. I mean, so what was his enthusiasm that just lit that fire that you didn't know existed underneath you?
Well, it was mostly he was encouraging. You know, he wouldn't say do it this way or do it that way. He was just like, golly, Mark, that is just really some peculiar looking work there, and you got to keep going, you know. He was very Southern, you know. I remember it'd be a red filter, a green filter, and a Yowler filter. So
I don't think I've ever seen that one in the the Adorama catalog, the Yowler filter.
Exactly, the Yowler filter. I mean, he taught woodworking also, and he was an all around shop class teacher.
Oh,
you know, but he was just a great guy.
See, that's the kind of teacher every student needs in high school. That person that just will help you find what you're looking for.
It was positive reinforcement, and actually, I'm gonna have to include my journalism teacher as well, because you know, in high school there was the not only the yearbook, but was it a newspaper?
Yeah, probably a school newspaper.
Yeah,
we had that. Yeah.
So she was Mrs. Watley, maybe
Okay.
something like that. But it was a place for positive reinforcement.
See, think
And,
about that. You remember those two names, but you probably can't remember your algebra teacher, your U.S. history
God,
teacher,
no.
your
God,
earth
no.
science teacher. But Mr. Tanner and his Yeller, you got that right up on your heart. Like, you know him for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
So
were you a little worried about Brooks being a commercial school, or was commercial the photography you wanted to get into?
no, I always fancied myself, like probably 99% of the photographers out there, I was going to work for National Geographic,
Okay.
and I was going to go out there, travel the world, and have a couple of 35 millimeters slung around my neck. And, there I was,
Right. Yeah.
kind of a thing. And, so I got into it. I would look for those kind of opportunities at Brooks, but I really wanted to learn the ins and outs of photography, build my skill set, know what I was talking about, be able to accomplish a lot of different kind of assignments that might come my way and stuff like that. And I love learning about how cameras worked, and we were doing 4x5 at the time, and all of that. And
what was your when you saw that 4x5 camera for the first time? What were you thinking?
I was pretty jazzed about it. I was, of course, intimidated and everything. It's not anything I'd never had my hands on one before. Right. It wasn't until I actually you had to buy your own camera when you were out there. So it wasn't until I actually purchased one and brought it back to my apartment and set it all up and everything that I was like, oh man, I cannot wait to get going with this.
It's interesting. Like those cameras your dad was bringing home from Asia are one thing. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you get this big wood field camera, this thing, this monster, and you're like, whoa, this is nothing like those Olympus or Minolta or Nikon, anything that he's ever brought home. This is a thing. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. And also is like, well, if this is the tool I'm going to have to work with, I got to figure out how to manage this.
Yes.
But, at the same time, some people, once they got into 4x5, then they just stayed in that 4x5 world and stuff. But I always would gravitate back to 35 millimeters. Yeah. That was always my tool of choice.
Right.
And I did love learning about 4x5 and, how to learn to manipulate focus, manipulate perspective, and stuff like that. So a lot of things you learn about 4x5 is applying that when you have other tools you have to work with. So that's about as far as I think. Once I got out of my first year, no, that's not true. But anyway, generally speaking, I was more of a 35 guy than I was 4x5.
Okay. You were there 79 to 82?
Correct. I'm a little vague on the years.
Okay.
Do
you remember?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Do you remember a classmate, Ken Steinhardt? He had a stutter.
If you put I'd never forget a face.
Okay.
I'm not great on names. Okay. I'd have to look at my class photo.
I just thought about it. He's a dear friend of mine. He lives just a couple miles away. He went to Brooks, and I think he graduated 83.
Okay.
He's a Wisconsin kid. He came out, but he has a stutter. So yeah. So
the class I went one full year at Brooks, and then I had to take time off to go back home and earn some money. Right. I went back to San Antonio, and by earning money, I bagged groceries at the commissary on base
Okay.
for, basically 1/4 a bag at the time. And that was one way I applied some of that to
Yeah.
getting through school.
Well,
But
yeah.
anyway, I took a little bit of time off, so I didn't graduate with the same class I started
Okay.
with.
Yeah. And that's typical. I remember people saying if you graduated from Brooks, well, I was, if you graduated from Brooks, you weren't very successful because if you were super good, they would have plucked you out and gone to New York or Miami or, you'd have been off to Nordstrom's or Bullock's or somewhere and shot their catalog.
Yeah.
And I was always like, wait a minute, they don't want you to graduate. They're trying to get you out of here early.
Well, I remember hanging out, at the Montecito campus sometimes, and there were like rumors that Joseph Karsh was here,
Yes.
interviewing students and stuff, or Jay Silverman was up from LA talking to students and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, this is a really serious school, because I would, I was really into the history of photography also, and love other photographers' work and stuff like that. So, to hear those names be in your neighborhood, it was like, wow, this is really going to happen. But we'll get to it later on in my story. But that was like the beginning,
So are you thinking that as school's ending, you're getting towards the end, like where you were going to go, your early career? Were you thinking what? Where was Mark going to land?
I was, I'll be honest with you. By the time I graduated, I really hadn't a clue how I was going to make a living in photography, because I will say one of the drawbacks, and they did try, but one of the things I did not find was how to run a successful photography business. There wasn't enough of the
business side,
business side of it. Like, what if you're going to open up a studio? How are you going to run it? How do you manage that? How much do you need to make it run? That kind of stuff. So,
well, it's funny you say stuff, but we don't realize how super important that is. Because if you're,
oh my God,
if you're blind to it, and you don't end up working for FedEx and having a 9-to-5 photo job for them and getting a pension and a retirement, and you're on the freelance life your whole time, it is a lot of loss. I mean, you are wandering around for a very long time.
Right. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to go to my small, I didn't have a small hometown to go back to and open up a portrait studio and be that guy who was the photographer in town. I wasn't, I was kind of interested in magazines, and there was that. I was probably more interested in editorial at the time, but still, how do I get my foot in the door? What kind of portfolios are they requiring? That kind of stuff. So there wasn't enough, I think, I'm not trying to dismiss it, but there were very few teachers who had come from the working profession and were showing us how to do this. A lot of them were just, familiar with being instructors.
Let me let you in on a little secret. That's still happening today.
Yeah. I can imagine.
There's so little of that being taught today, and there's so much more freelancing today than ever before, as you know. And yet these kids don't understand taxes, business write-offs, business plans and proposals, everything that means something at the end of the year when your accountant wants to see your numbers and you've got nothing but a couple of receipts and a parking slip.
Like, exactly.
You're like,
so
what did you do for a year? I don't know.
Yeah, right. So, I didn't really have a definitive answer of where I was going to go and where I was going to end up. So, I had to leave Santa Barbara. There wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to work there, So I ended up going back to San Antonio, and it just so happened that I landed a job. I was an in-house photographer for a big insurance company, USAA. And,
okay.
And it was two of us in the graphics department, two photographers, and we kind of ran the whole thing. And, so every skill I learned in Brooks played there,
Mm-hmm.
So we ran a lab in there. We shot all kinds of executive portraits. We weren't doing the broken bones or car wrecks. It was just
Right.
their internal stuff,
Corporate.
their internal magazine,
Mm-hmm.
their newspaper, and stuff like that. So it was a great place to just land, for the time being. But I'll never forget that when I sat down for my first interview, when I got the job, the guy was talking to me and he was saying, this is your salary to start out, and in 20 years' time, you'll be making this much and stuff like that. And I went, whoa, wait a minute, back off. You know what I'm doing in 20 years? I don't want anybody to tell me what I'm doing in 20 years or what I'm making or anything. This is way too planned out for me. So in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't going to last there, So what happened was while I was working there, I think it was like 8 or 9 months into that job, a good buddy of mine from high school was getting married in Connecticut, and he asked me to be in the wedding. So I went to Connecticut to be in the wedding, and some of my friends from college at Brooks were in New York City assisting
Mm-hmm.
photographers.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to go down and just visit them, say hi, and, catch up and see what they're doing. So I went, after the wedding, I went to Manhattan and hooked up with my friends. And, oh, my God, they took me on a couple of location shoots. My friend was working for Avedon. My other friend, she was working for Barbara Bordnick. My other friend, and they were just working with all these name photographers that I just studied at Brooks. And I went, this is what I'm going to do. I have to be in New York. This is where I need to be. So I got back, gave notice at USAA, and said, thanks, it's been real, but I'm out of here. And I went to New York, and
They didn't say, wait, we got your 20-year plan all settled for you. Where are
we
you
got
going?
like 20. Yeah.
Where are you going? Mark,
You
come
haven't
back.
reached your 1 year milestone. But, it's a great company.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They were great people and all that kind of stuff. It was
Listen,
really a
as your
great
first
experience.
job, I mean, that's a good job, right? You got
Exactly.
stuff, you're grinding. You got things to
Yeah.
do. There's worse places you could be, for sure.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But when your heart
So-
calls and you see what's happening in New York, you're going to go.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And so I went there. My friends said, you can just stay with us until you get it settled down. And so,
Did you pack up the Subaru and went?
no car. I sold everything.
Oh,
I
man.
sold everything. I wasn't going to take a car to New York. I knew that.
Okay. You were smart enough to not show
yeah.
up with a car.
So they said, you can stay with us temporarily. And I ended up, poor guys, sleeping on their couch for a year and a half, in a 1-bedroom apartment, But I started working right away for people, and I started doing location work a lot. So I was hardly ever in New York, as it turns out. So it worked until it didn't work anymore.
Right.
So,
was that time though? Was that first year in New York? Was that super just like energized to your soul? I mean, to be around all those people and photographers and the hustle and bustle.
It was. I think about it now, and it was so different because New York is like all the people. Most of the people I ever wanted to meet, study, work for, or be around, or whatever, they were all in New York, and I would literally open up the phone book, and their name would be in the phone book, like Mary Ellen Mark.
Right.
You know, I remember looking her up in the phone book, the number, and calling her up and asking her for work. You know, it was like, and she answered the phone. You know, there was no call waiting or caller ID or anything like that. Most of the time, they'd answer the phone.
Hi, this is Mary.
And I'm sorry, did I wake you up? But, you know, I'm a little eager. Yeah, you did wake me up. So, but they were available to work with. So she was generous. You know, she invited me down to her Soho loft, and we met and talked. And I never worked for her. It never happened, but it was that kind of environment. You know, you could just meet your idols. My roommate in this small apartment, my roommate was Rudy Hoffman, and he was Avedon's first assistant the whole time I was there, you know. So
that name sounds familiar. How long did they work together for?
Oh, years and years and years. He did all the Western projects,
yes!
the American West series. He was his printer. And Matt, we used to have those 4x6 4x6 prints in that apartment while his wife would spot tone those.
No, Mark.
She would spot these prints, and they were just laying on our floor.
Oh my God!
It's just unbelievable, you know. So I was there the whole time that he was working on that series.
Oh,
and you know, just again, you know, there was reverence for Avedon, but you didn't really know it was going to become this gigantic
right.
of a thing.
I mean, otherwise you would have stolen 4 or 5 of those prints.
Right. Exactly.
Good Lord.
So,
I can only imagine what those prints go for today. I don't even want to look it up and know because
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't either. But anyway, again, it was that kind of environment, and
that's beautiful, though. That's just beautiful.
You know, it was just really, really a great time, you know, to be able to do that. And this was in the 80s. So, you know, 80s music, new wave, punk rock, all of that kind of stuff. There was a real New York energy at the time. I think it was, you know, just one of the best places to be in the world at the time. And, you know, new artists coming up, Basquiat, I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, I worked with a photographer, Richard Corman, who photographed him, so I was meeting him. Same photographer, we shot Madonna before her first album came out when she was living in the Lower East Side. Who's this? You know, she's going to be a big star. Watch, you know, watch. And now, you know, it was just kind of, I knew them when,
right.
so to speak.
Yeah, you knew them when they just came in to, you know, have a picture taken. Wow.
Yeah. But that was really the place where, you know, you'd go into a studio and like Phil Marco, you know, real famous tabletop photographer. And plus he was getting into shooting film commercials then, but it wasn't this loosey-goosey photographer, you know, kind of a guy. It was a factory. It was a workshop. It was people's careers that were being done there and everything. And so you knew that, you were learning that this was a real profession and there was a real way of working and there were roles to be played.
Wow.
Things like that, learning the job of the photographer, the job I first heard about producers. I first heard about first assistants, second assistants, location managers, art directors, all that kind of stuff that go into the business of photography,
so special. So special. Were you taking,
Yeah.
were you one of those guys? Did you keep your camera close to you and make pictures of New York during the day, during the time?
That was kind of a faux pas in my day.
Okay.
You never brought your own camera to another photographer's set, and unless you were asked to shoot alongside, second camera or something like that. So I never had behind the scenes or any of that kind of stuff. I tried to stay,
Right.
to the
Your
direction
job.
of the photographer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mark's there to do a
Exactly.
job. And damn it, we want those sandbags from there to there.
Exactly.
Yeah, because nowadays
Exactly.
everybody's got behind the scenes. They got this damn phone and everybody's
Oh, my
shooting
God.
4K video and taking pictures and posting on Instagram and they're not
Yeah.
and they're not remembering they have a job to do.
Well, exactly. And I tell you what, that used to be when social media first came out on, using the phones and stuff like that. It was hard to get people to pay attention to your set because a lot of the times, they think there was time in between setups or something like that, and they'd be on their phone, and then all of a sudden they're just caught up in their phone and they're not doing their job. So,
Well, even the producer or the art director or the creative director, they're on set.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you look over and there's 5 suits and they're all on their phones in meetings or prepping or doing something else. And you're like, why are you here? What are
Yeah.
you doing? The food's not that good. What the hell are you doing on set? Get the hell out of here.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine
Yeah,
though?
there was a lot of.
Can you imagine
things
though,
that-
Mark, in your time, if you had taken selfies with all those people you ran across?
Oh my gosh.
What a selfie would have looked like with a young unknown Madonna or Batiste or any of those people with Abaddon,
Yeah,
with Mary.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my God. You could have done a book
Yeah.
on just those people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mark's coffee
it's,
table.
It's really, it's fun to hear the other stories from the photographers about those shoots and stuff like that. And, like now, people want to hear what it was like back then and stuff like that. So I read a lot on Facebook from those photographers telling the story behind the scene about those shoots and stuff like that. And that's the way it was.
Yeah, a
That's
totally
great
different
insight.
time. I mean, people don't understand the amount of time you used to be able to get with people, where now you're lucky if you get 10 minutes, 15 minutes, where you could have gotten 2 hours, 2 days. It could have gone on forever. Like I had Greg Gorman on, and he was talking about how he would have people for, like, he had Bowie for a full day, just hanging out with Bowie and then they would go out to dinner and they would still go after another 3 or 4 more hours after that till 4 a.m. I'd be like,
Right.
what the hell did you and David do? And he goes, we just would shoot, and David would have an idea, and then he would have tried on this, and then he would do that. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
my
It was a real collaboration between the artists, both artists, right?
You're right. Both
Yeah.
artists. And that's what I think people forget. You
Yeah.
are an artist and you're working with another one. And there's this synergy, this thing you're trying to create real, intimate moments
Yeah.
and make these things. It's not like I just come in and tell
Yeah,
you to sit
right.
down on my Apple box and look to the left. I mean, that's not how it works.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I loved about stories about those kind of artists, how creative they were, and they had something to say about the image, or they were just more interested in exploring an idea than what's this going to do to my brand.
Right. Yeah.
We're
Yes.
so protective about our image now.
Right.
It seems like, where you have your handlers who are actually, telling you how to do
Yes.
this.
Oh God.
I've seen a little bit of that.
I'm sure. I'm
So,
sure. When were you starting to feel you were ready to put yourself behind the camera?
Well, I, I spent 5 years in New York, and that just flew by. I never felt like I was going to be a true New Yorker. It wasn't my hometown. I still wanted to explore some other areas and stuff like that. So I ended up moving out to San Francisco. And
Wow, you're
and
just hitting all the spots.
hitting all the spots.
Wow.
Exactly. So I moved out to San Francisco, and there I started getting into a little bit more of the production side of photography. I was doing location scouting, producing, and stuff like that, only because it would pay a few bucks more. So I would, I'm going to go out to San Francisco. This is where I'm going to make my mark. In the meantime, I'll do some location scouting and some producing for photographers and stuff like that while I work on my book.
Now, was that in your front of your mind to say, okay, I can widen my palette here by taking these producer jobs or location jobs, or was it purely like Mark needs to get paid?
It was a little bit of both. I had done some location work. I worked for photographer Dick Durrance for many, many years, and he was a pretty high-end commercial photographer,
Yes.
big budget stuff, traveling around the world.
My heart's getting warm, Mark, you saying these names. I haven't heard these names in so long.
So he was throwing me out there, to go out and do these locations and stuff like that. So I had a little bit of experience, and I kind of liked the location work because I could just be out on my own, and I was working on my, I guess in retrospect now, how to approach a location.
Right.
If this were me, what are the angles here? What's the lighting like and stuff like that? And so that was another process of my development and all of that. And I liked the location work, and I was keeping pretty busy with that. So so it was a little bit of both of the money and the experience.
Right.
Again.
I mean, that's great experience.
I was dragging my feet, I think, on the photography part of it for some reason. In retrospect, when I look at it, why did it take like 5, 6, 7 years before I did anything? But anyway, it'll probably make sense later.
Right.
As we
Sure. But that's really
talk
kind
a
of
little bit more.
But that's kind of like the majority of photographers. It's never like right out of the gate, bang, you get out of college and you're a legend. There's work, and there's a bit of a grind, and there's assisting and like being that location or doing small production producing or scouting stuff. That actually makes you better, because then when you come onto a set or a scene, you could be like, I understand what my production guy's telling me. He's just not yanking my chain and pulling me from here to there. I understand exactly what he means.
Yeah. I mean, I was doing small jobs for little magazines and catalogs and stuff like that here and there, but it wasn't the majority of my time, and and I was getting a lot of mileage off of this location scouting.
You probably had no idea there was that much work.
I didn't. And that was just, that was just on the still side. I hadn't even gotten into the film business yet.
Right.
So,
that whole other world.
Yeah, I'm still in stills world at this point, and so anyway.
Well, how long do you stay in Frisco?
I was there. Well, at that time, I was there another 6 or 7 years.
Okay,
I think was about that amount of time, and. But that's when I started getting introduced to the film business. I had done a job with another photographer, DeWitt Jones, and he was another National Geographic photographer from days gone by. And we were doing a campaign for United Airlines, and it was the whole Asian flight route. We started in like Korea and went all the way down to Australia, just shooting for United Airlines and back. We did this a couple of times. So I had some experience in Asia. So one day I get a call from this producer from a film production company. And I don't even know what a film production company is, at this point. Really.
Right. Yeah.
And they go, we heard you have done some work in Asia. We need a scout to go to Thailand and Hong Kong. Do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go back. It was just like a few months later that I get this call and I go, yeah, I want to go back. So they fly me back out there and I'm going around scouting, and this is like this whole big film crew that's going to be arriving it was for Northwest Airlines, really big director, Michael Work, big production company. Anyway, I get out there and I do this job and the director loves the work and everything like that. And I get back to the U.S. and they just started hiring me after that. So all of a sudden I made a switch from stills to film. And I'm in this film world all of a sudden as a location scout. But I was thinking to myself many years afterwards, and it's kind of funny, the director would look at pictures and he'd go, can we get a dolly through this doorway or whatever? And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is a dolly? I think back at this now, this is a director, top of this, internationally renowned director. I have no business. So I thought to myself, if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't have taken that job. I would have been too scared or told myself I was unqualified or whatever. But because I didn't know and I just did it my way, it worked out. And I made a go of it. It just happened. So that was like one of those really lucky breaks, I think.
Sure.
For me.
Yeah.
So
tell me this, because this is your location scout, a scout, before the internet when you start, and it's before digital. So could you tell me what did it all entail? Were you taking notes? Were you taking Polaroids? Because it's it's much different, as in today, if you and I went to go location scout than it would be pre-digital internet.
The way location scouting worked back then was you'd go out and you'd shoot print film on your camera, and you'd find a 1-hour processing lab, and you'd go out all day and come back before the cutoff time. You'd fly into town, find your nearest 1 hour lab. What's your cutoff time? And then you go out and scout all day, make that cutoff time, and then you get the prints back. You'd have to lay them all out in these manila folders. You glue them on your pictures onto a manila folder, and you do these panorama shots to give them the 180 perspective and then the reverse and stuff like that. So there was kind of a formula, and you'd have all the sun direction measurements. I would put what millimeter I shot this with, as much detail as you can, and you'd have these stack of folders at the end of the day that you'd FedEx out. And it'd either be at the end of the day or the next day or at the end of the job, you'd complete it and then send this out. And then, and that's how it worked. So, 1 hour photos, manila folders, glue sticks, and hustle,
Wow.
So you always had these deadlines.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I remember when I first started working in film that you'd scout a location. Let's say you'd have a week to do all the location work in Northern California, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Then after you sent all the material to the director, he'd look at it, narrow down the choices. They would fly up and scout, okay?
Right.
And with the producer and stuff like that. And then it would either be, you'd have a whole nother week, to work on permits, permissions, all that kind of stuff. And then you would shoot. Where towards the end now, or when I was finishing that part of it, it was like scout, and they'd all show up and just start shooting. The turnaround was just that. There was just more time. Of course, I think I started when they were still typing out letters. Wow. The people in the production office would still be on typewriters typing out letters for permission, insurance forms, stuff like that.
Now it's an
I'll
app
be
on your
way
phone.
Before. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
But what
So-
a great learning tool to have.
Oh, well, working in stills, you'd have one photographer, and he was just the boss. He answered all the questions, make all the decisions, all of that, and you'd have the photographer, maybe stylist, makeup, wardrobe, and a couple of assistants, and that was your team. And then you'd get into film, and it was like, how do you deal with 50 people on the crew? They were big back then, and so it learned how to work with departments. Learning what all these different departments do and arrangements and stuff like that.
Jeez.
So it got me used to being around big things.
Yeah, a big production.
Cranes, dollies. I learned what a dolly was.
When it showed up on
And,
set, were you surprised that's a dolly? When you saw it?
Well, no. I ended up figuring out right away after he asked me that question what a dolly was. I went, I need to know what this is. So, but yeah,
That's almost sweet to be like, I have no idea what a dolly is, and it's kind of a woman's name, so I'm very lost. Like,
exactly.
how big is her ass need
Exactly.
to be to get her through this doorway? Like, what am I dealing with
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
Oh man. So how did that progress? Did you dive in and be like, hey, what's this like behind the camera? Your frames move at 20 frames a second?
From there, I did really well being a location scout, location manager when I was in California.
Did you have good organizational skills?
Yeah, I was really organized.
Okay.
yeah, I was organized. I didn't have any drama or any of that. I let all the people from LA have the drama. And, as a matter of fact, I was in California. I was working with a lot of companies coming up from Los Angeles, and they were all part of this. There's just there's a drama that comes with it.
Yes, yes.
And I was, tell you the truth, man, I was getting a little tired of working with these kind of people all the time. I wasn't enjoying myself and stuff like that. So I just got to the point where I need a different experience. I just want to change things up. And I'd done a couple of jobs in Texas. Let's say for last year, I was in California, and I was specifically doing them around Austin and the Hill Country. And I just fell in love with Austin. This was back in the early 90s. Okay. It was still a really small town.
Oh, yeah.
Just nice and fun, and the music and the lifestyle and everything. And I went, this really is where I need to be. So I ended up packing it up and moving to Austin. And I just thought, if I can make it work in the film business here, great. If not, I'm gonna figure it out. But I'm more interested in a lifestyle right now than, I was so caught up in this California film industry. It was, so.
Well, I mean, what about this time? You're in your 30s, right?
Yeah, I'm in my young 30s.
Yeah, so you've put in some time. You've done New York, California. It's a grind. At some point you need to decide, like, I'm all in for a career, the career I want, not the jumping from lily pad to lily pad kind of thing.
Yeah. And I was also thinking, I've really spent a lot of time in production, and if I'm going to do photography, now has to be the time before I get too stretched out.
Right.
And so I got to Austin, and I ended up, fortunately, meeting this other director, Jeff Bednarz, and he ran a company out of Dallas. And so I started a few jobs with him, and soon enough, he always liked shooting with a second unit on his commercial photography. He was a big commercial director, and he always liked shooting second unit, and just having another crew out there getting material and stuff like that. I mean, his work was very lifestyle oriented, outdoorsy, stuff like that. So one day we're on location in a hotel room, and looking at locations, and the producer, it's the producer, Jeff, and myself. And she goes, "Okay, Jeff, who do you want to use for second unit on this one?" And he's like, "Oh God!" And I guess he hadn't been happy with the second unit people he'd used in the past. So the producer says, "Well, why don't you just have Mark shoot it? He's got all the shots lined up for you." Because I would pride myself on trying to come up with frames, like, here's your location and this is your angle, and these are my suggestions. And he loved it. He just always loved the framing that I did for him. And so he was like, "Sure, let's just have you go out." And I was like a little bit in a panic mode, because I didn't know anything about operating cameras, film cameras, And she's like, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you a good AC and stuff like that." So we went out, and on that job, I would shoot with this old, it was called the Mitchell Freeze camera. And it was a 35 millimeter Mitchell, and just heavy metal, boxy, with the Mickey Mouse ear, film magazines, and it was just a beast. But all the settings on it were very still camera oriented. You had a shutter speed, f-stop, what else? And then it was just the time interval.
Right. And
So
you still had to meter everything.
The math
Yep.
made sense. And yeah, I'd meter. So that I started shooting a lot of second unit. And then when Jeff would take a PSA, like a no money job or whatever, he'd have me shoot it. And so one thing just led to another. And then eventually, I think after a couple years, I became his main DP. But I was, at the same time, I was also able to learn from the DPs he had on the main camera and working side by side with them, you know. I mean, because a lot of times it was just another off angle of their setup.
Right.
So I was really in on, oh, I see why he's lighting it this way, because we got these two angles. And if we went over here, we wouldn't be, you know, the light would be, you know, so
Right.
that kind of stuff. I was real fortunate to, you know, be around these great DPs that he had, you know.
Well, I'm sure at that point, your maturity and time of all the work you've put in, you could frame, you could see, you knew what a picture took to be, where it was. It was just learning this new little mechanical thing that made its frames move. That's all you needed to learn. And then you were already there, because as a photographer, you know what it takes to make a good photo, whether it's lighting, the angle, the focal length, positioning your subject.
Yeah.
The motion stuff is just, okay, just don't touch it while it's moving. That's all. Don't bump the camera.
Yeah. Well, the hardest part for me actually was learning how to make the camera move.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was used to getting my feet in the right spot and using the right lens to frame it and stuff like that, and designing a great shot. But if you just did that and let the camera roll, it was boring.
Right.
So how to make the camera move, how to put it in position, how to anticipate things. It was just, there were more factors involved in a film camera, I would say, only because of the movement.
Sure.
You know? I mean, all of a sudden, does this shot become a dolly move? Does it become a crane move? Does it become a walk and talk? You know, what are the ways to approach this?
Yeah. And at that point, people don't realize how big those cameras were. So it wasn't as easy as like, oh, we'll just throw it on a dolly. I mean, you better make sure you have all the right stuff, because that thing weighs 80 pounds. We're not talking about a 2.5 pound little camera that we're putting on a slider like today. Yeah. You know, so it was,
they were the big Berthas and, you know, I mean, there was a great system, you know, on how to hold the camera. I mean, how to just hold the camera was a technique in itself that needed to be learned. You know, this 3-point access to keep it stable and stuff like that. There was a whole learning curve on that,
right.
You know, and that's, you know, sometimes, you know, just a fantastic camera operator, which is a job in itself, would be so important, because they knew how to do it well. Mm-hmm. They could, you know, you can walk down a path and not have all this shakiness because they knew how to operate that way. But anyway, yeah, the cameras were a beast. You know, I mean, you always kind of divided it up. You could have, for a lot of handheld work and stuff like that, they did make cameras that only used like 100-foot mags as opposed to the 400. or 1,000.
Right.
So you could do these kind of run and gun type of things. But most of the time you could only afford to rent one camera, and that was the beast
Right.
you were given.
That's the part. That's the partner you brought to the party. That's who it was.
Exactly. Exactly.
When did you start to feel comfortable? Like you were like, okay, Mark's not having night sweats. I feel like I could do this because it's a different monster.
Well, yeah. Oh my God. It really is a different monster.
Because if I threw a Hasselblad at you, you're like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. I could change this 120 in the dark and I could put on that 80 and I'm good to go. But someone gives you an Airy, all of a sudden you're like, oh, fumbling fingers.
Exactly.
Couple of years?
It was just really trial and error. But I tell you what, Matt, the most important thing that I learned, and I adopted this really early, it's not all about me, okay? There are other people on the set that are professionals. It's their job to make all of this work, listen to what they have to say, accept their input, things like that, I mean, the gaffer that you're in a situation, and let's say you're working with ultra high speed cameras or something like that, and you're into a flicker situation. Well, the gaffer might have just come off a job that had the same problem. So, instead of me coming in the sage on the stage, know it all, I didn't. I'm like, Mr. Gaffer, what do we do in this situation?
Yeah.
So, you have a lot of people that you're working with that can offer up help. And I really did rely on that. And I wasn't afraid to ask for help either,
That's
like
big.
I said, it's not all about me, and it just doesn't rely on my back. Now, I took all the credit, but no, I'm just kidding. So, and the other thing is working in Texas. I have to say, was one of the best film crews you could ever ask for. Everybody's just friendly, supportive. They get along. They make the day fun. All that. Whereas in other areas, sometimes you get a little attitude.
It's funny you say Texas because it's kind of forgotten that, especially in those early 90s, everybody's like, you got to be in New York, you got to be in LA, and everybody forgot about the Lone Star State. Like, there's production companies everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to make a living in Utah, you could have. I mean, it just depends on where you wanted to live.
Yeah, exactly. And there were high-end ad agencies there, so they had, reputable clients and, high-end clients and stuff like that. The TV show Dallas had shot there, so that brought a lot of people up in their skill set, by working in television and stuff like that. So it was a very capable crew there with, tons of experience and all that. So we didn't lack anything in Texas.
When was the point where you're like, I'm all in on this moving photo thing? This 24 frames a second has kind of got me. Was there a point where you're like, there's no turning back, I'm in?
Yeah. What I enjoyed mostly about it was the how you worked, the going to work every day. I liked working with a lot of people. I liked different departments. I liked the bigness of it at the time. It was just you could just get a little bit more involved in things, and the productions tended to be bigger. In the early days, there was more money to throw at everything, so things were big back then, and so I got caught up a lot.
What was the cost of maybe like an average big shoot back then? What was the spending cost?
300, 350 to 500.
Yeah.
I mean, some jobs were multi-million-dollar jobs, but those tended to be
sure
around the world and a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
Stuff. But I don't think back in those days with film, you could really get out the door unless you had $300,000-$400,000.
Right.
I would think.
Yeah.
I don't. You know what? It's the old joke. I don't know how much things cost. The producers just tell me yes or no. Yes, you can have that. No, you can't have that.
You're not having that.
I don't know how much it costs.
Yeah. Nobody needs a speedboat. You don't need it.
Exactly.
But for this shot,
and I think producers like me because I wasn't one of those guys that had to have all my toys. I was like, if I have one camera and a good range of lenses, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
And to tell you the truth, that's the way that director worked. I mean, this guy that gave me the opportunity to be a second unit, we have a 40-year history now. I DP'd everything he did, practically everything he did for the last 20 years. So, we were a team, the Wyman stuff, all the Yeti stuff was with him. And, it was just run and gun.
Did this open up a creative side of you didn't know was there?
Yeah, for sure. I could tell that I was better at spontaneity than I was at planning.
Interesting.
I could go in on a technical scout or something like that, but I wasn't one of those guys that was like, this is exactly where the lamp needs to be. This is exactly where the camera's going to end up. Put the track here and stuff like that. I was like with my crew, I would be, let's key light from the left side. Let's attack it from this angle or something like that. Because what I found is when you show up to go shoot, it's all different. The daytime is different. The weather's different. You just might have a better idea. You've had a good night's sleep. So I generally would tend to be a little loose, unless, of course, we were on a stage and we had to do green screen or something like that. That's when it gets really, really precise. But in terms of handling a location, I was more into turning off lights than adding lights. You could just turn off all the interior lights in a room with one good window, and you could shoot all morning that way.
Yep.
It was just, those are the kind of things that, I just found. But Matt, having said that, that only happened when we went to digital with the higher ISOs and faster lenses and stuff like that. So I will have to backtrack and say, when I shot film, a lot of it had to be lit.
Okay, so you mentioned that monster. When did you start hearing about digital and this thing coming?
Yeah, good question. When the camera and the film stock became absolutely magic and perfect, that's when we went to digital. They finally got 5219 where you could do almost anything with it, and it was so beautiful. And the 435 was just a dynamic camera, and it was just, you loved it. You just loved it. I remember in my assistant days in New York, the Nikon F3 and Kodachrome 64 was just a win-win combination. You just loved shooting that all day long. And the 435 with 5219 stock, you know, that Latitude was 14 stops or whatever. It was just great. And then all of a sudden, digital started rearing its head. And so we did a couple of jobs on it. And
what did you think?
Of course, well, we, you know, at first we just ran out of media all the time because the director was still shooting like he had an infinite amount of film cans at his disposal, but we didn't know how much media we needed and stuff like. So we'd run out of media, or we'd have to wait for 6 hours for the tech to be able to download these cards, or you know, it seemed impossible. And I thought to myself at the time, well, it's coming. I know that, but we're probably a few years away from it really, really happening. In 6 months' time, nobody shot film. It was all digital.
Isn't that nuts? That is nuts.
It happened that quickly, you know. And the other thing that was really frustrating in the beginning was you used to have to call up the post house to see what format camera they were set up for. Like some post houses could take the digital format of the red cameras, where the other post houses couldn't do red. They could only do Sony or something like that.
Right.
So you had to choose your camera
on your production house.
Post house got the job, you know. But that soon went away.
Yeah, that went away. But that was an issue.
But that was an issue for quite a number of jobs.
Right.
You know, so you might have liked and learned all the peculiarities about a red camera, and then your next job, you got to switch over to a Sony, you know, and go learn that menu and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, God.
You know?
And it's got a little bit of a different footprint, and that means that the plate's a little different, and then you got to hang the mat board. It's like everything was a little different.
Right. And your camera house, you had to wait for them to get up to speed too.
Right.
You know?
And your Digitech, he had to have enough hard drives and enough cards, and there was this thing the back end was never thought of when digital. It was magical box, takes pictures, they're there. But what about the post-production work that literally now can happen on site? That was a whole nother monster no one even thought that was coming.
Exactly.
I was on a shoot for the NBA where they literally ran out of media. Like they had no more card space, no more hard drives. And they're trying to call Sammy's up at, you know, this is like Sunday after 5 and there's nothing open and people are panicking. And then they're making that decision. Okay, what do we erase off the drive to get this footage on so we can shoot the next card? And you want to see people sweat and make their 6-figure salary. I mean, there was a lot of screaming and hollering. Who didn't bring enough goddamn hard drives? Well, like you said, nobody knew the damn director was going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. It's just, those early years were bonzo crazy.
Yeah, and that was you mentioned something interesting there, rolling and rolling and rolling. That was once all of that digitalness got sorted out about download times and enough cards on set and stuff like that. I tell you what, the camera never stopped rolling during the day. You know, it would just go and go and go. And which was, it's good in one sense, in this, you know, they're going to end up with more material than they need at the end of the day. But when you used to shoot film, you know, the AD would go, okay, ready, and action. Everybody was paying attention because it was film.
Yes.
You know, so everybody was waiting. And when you heard that sound going through the camera, everybody was quiet and everybody was paying attention. Where now, you know, you shoot, the camera's always rolling. So, people are still going on with their jobs on the back of the set, or getting on their phones and not paying attention, except for the directors looking at the monitor and myself on the eyepiece, So there's pluses and minuses to all of that,
You say that and you're right, because I remember when they would say, "All right, quiet on the set," and that meant something.
Yeah.
Oh,
that meant something.
Oh,
yeah.
We're about to go. We're done with the 30 minutes of rehearsal. We're going.
Yeah.
And the actors come out, and boom, everybody hits their mark, and here we go.
And you didn't waste film because it was $1 a foot.
Yeah,
that's how much.
You were burning money.
You just you just wasted $200 by not paying attention.
Right.
So that was one of the differences.
Do you?
But at the end of the day, now I think they've finessed everything where it's a pretty well-oiled machine, and I'm sure for a lot of people on the back end of that, it was really comforting to me at the end of the day to know I got it. Okay, because I've seen it in the monitor. I've been staring at it all day. I know I got it. Whereas on the film days, you just never got a good night's sleep until you heard back from the neg report that everything was fine. And so you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, call the film processing lab. How did we do? Everything looked great. No scratches.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2 more hours of sleep.
Yeah. You're not back focused by 6 inches. The eyes are sharp, right?
Yeah. Or that. Yeah.
How many times? That ear's tack sharp. Is that what you were looking for?
Exactly.
No, because we're not doing a hearing aid ad. So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
We'll reshoot that. Yeah. It's, there is a comforting moment to know, like, okay, we nailed it, people. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
Wrap it up. We're moving on. We can tear this set down. Here we go.
Yeah. That's the other thing. You couldn't break set until you got the camera report saying that everything was fine. So it saved a lot of money on that end, and for production in terms of that, and also it just it gives it. It's just more. When we were shooting film, we'd have video, but the video was so bad.
It
was those combo 8s, and everything was so contrasty, or black and white.
Right.
And, so the client never walked away 100% confident, or anybody, until they saw the dailies.
The dailies, yeah.
They could go into the post house and look at dailies. So it was just interesting.
Were you fully in, or where were you still like dabbling in photography? Did you kind of jump back and forth a little bit through the 90s, or?
I not so much in the 90s, but in 2000, I would always have these, especially the director, Jeff, we would do a lot of real people kind of lifestyle commercials, or like the Salvation Army and stuff like that. So I started introducing still photography as portraiture within those spots. So in that sense, I always had photography with me. So if the opportunity arose, I could do a nice portrait of somebody, or I could use still photography techniques in that. I remember a series for State Farm where we would start out of a portrait of our person, and I built like this Black Mariah backdrop where, that I would do for a portrait outdoors. And it just worked so well in the film part of it because it would almost start like a still frame and then grow into a live picture, the guy introducing himself or something like that. So I always try to keep those still elements, only because that's what my background was.
Right.
You know, always trying to do that.
Did you find a maturity level as you went on, like into like those 2000s, and you're doing those portraiture works, where now you've had so many years behind you, your 10,000 hours are in? Did you feel more? Right. Did you feel more of like a, not a polished photographer, but a maturity? Like you could just go about and manipulate your subject to give you exactly what you wanted?
Yeah, there was a little bit more freedom to kind of take chances, I guess, with a certain confidence level that there's going to be a little more success, I think, than not by taking this chance. We're better off taking this chance because we've been successful,
right,
as opposed to failing. So in those instances, yeah, I would not worry about being put in a bad location. I could generally light or lens my way out of a situation. So I had that kind of a confidence.
Right. Because early Mark wouldn't have known that. He wouldn't have known, like, oh, not the 50, go to the 135, or do this, do that. Like those things that you get in
sure. Yeah, exactly. Even by, deciding on what T-stop to use, don't worry about that background. I'll shoot it wide open. We don't have time to dress it. I'll just shoot it wide open. Let's go.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you could, there was more of an arsenal later on to pull something out, to shoot from the hip,
right,
so to speak.
Yeah. I noticed it at some point in my career where you're just kind of go, oh, don't want to say, oh, I figured it all out, but I didn't go in going, oh my God, I'm going to have to wing this. Here I go. It's like, you're like, you could fall back on all that experience. Either you've seen somebody do it, or you've done it a million times now and you're not even thinking about it. You're just like, no, guys.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 we're done. And then you look around and the young crew who used to be you is going, wow, that guy's brilliant.
Right. Well, I do have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, Jeff Bednar's, he's just a genius when it comes to directing, and he's intense, I will say. But he always not only pushed himself, or not only pushed me and the crew to do things different, but he also pushed himself. And so those expectations were always there. We, walk into yet another house in a neighborhood, and it's like, how are we going to do this different, Mark? What are we going to do different? And so you'd have to come up with something. It wouldn't be earth changing. We wouldn't change the dynamics of commercials or anything like that. But it was like, it's just a little different this time.
Right.
So there was always that.
And sometimes it can be movement, framing, just a little different lighting, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, okay, we've pivoted a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And lighting, that was one thing I wanted to bring up. Talk about another thing that's changed. Holy crap. Has lighting changed? Oh,
yeah.
Hello, LEDs. We're talking about a set being 110 degrees. Now it's normal.
Yeah.
And color temperature. What do you want? I'll give it to you in one increment at a time. When that came about, was that something that brought a tear to your eye?
It was pretty good because, I never liked waiting around to set up lights and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's a downer.
When you get on set, you just want to, let's just get a camera and start shooting something. And, but, film stocks just required the lights, and they were always big and they were always hot and stuff like that. So, it, and also, Jeff didn't want to wait for lights either, so things just started like getting placed by windows and stuff like that to just kind of quickly get a shot. But then all of a sudden you're locked into that look, like, why is all your stuff looking like it's shot near a window? So by the introduction of, these smaller LED lights and stuff like that, you could start to reintroduce those quicker. And the things totally 180-degree change for me when the tube lights came out.
Yes.
And those, my God,
those Kino flows?
Quality of the light. Well, it started with the Kino flows, but I mean just those singular tubes. Now.
Yeah.
Well, we used to actually pull apart those Kino flows and just, what are they? Cannibalize them. I just need one tube, okay? Yeah. And I ended up just liking that look. I loved it when a guy would just, we called it light on a stick, and we would take one of those Kino tubes, put it on the end of one of those broom poles, and walk around. And if I needed something from the left, the guy would just hold it to the left. If I needed it on the right, that kind of thing. It was so quick and it was a beautiful light. It wasn't, just settling for this. It was actually a really good light. I took I forget the brand. It came in a 6-tube kit or something like that. I had 3 big long ones, 3 medium, 3 6-inch tubes. And I went to Asia, and that's all I took. And I felt totally 100% comfortable with that, going there with just that. I knew I could do anything with it. So
I was on a set, and I
made a huge difference.
Oh yeah, no, I was on a set on a film set, and I was having this debate with the cameraman and the lighting guy. Who, when you get those two together, it's always fun. And I said, okay, which one was more revolutionary? The digital camera, which we're working with today, or the lighting we're working with today? And boy, did I walk away with a mongoose and a snake going at each other, because they both agree it's their light, their digital camera. But I almost want to say the light. And I don't know if that's the photographer in me still in love with the light, but the things I can do, I could take an LED light like this big and place it in a car or on a this or a that, and you can light up things you can never have thought of before 20 years ago. Never.
That's true. That's true. But I don't think those lights would have been invented unless the camera, ISO sensitivity, or the chip could handle that just small amount of light.
Right. Yeah, it's that chicken and the egg. Yeah.
This isn't the definitive answer to the argument. That's just what comes off the top of my head.
This is just what Mark says.
Yeah. I'm not sure
But I mean, it's amazing though, because you could be on a set. I'm sure you've been there, and the guy goes, "We need just a little bit more Calvin. Just kick it up to warm," and boop boop.
Sure.
And you're like, "Oh wow." Good. I mean, I was on a set where literally they had 5 lighting sets on the set, and a flip of a switch, you could just go, boom, it's morning, boom, it's evening, boom, we're in this bedroom, and he's just boom, 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 and you're just like, holy crap. And you couldn't see any of the lights. That was the amazing thing.
Well, that was the other thing. Yeah. It's, they're hidden, or they blend into, they can blend into a set, the tube lights blend in. Oh, and
everywhere.
You don't feel the heat. Was a big thing.
I was on a set where a extra had a light, LED light on his chest. His camera was to back, but he lit the actor in his walk-in and then walked away. And you're like, oh, that could have never happened. The guy's chest would have been on fire.
Exactly. Or you would have had to wear a white shirt and bounce light off of them to get that same, But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy.
I know.
Crazy.
It's awesome though. It really is.
It really is.
To work nowadays and be like, oh, yeah, I could do anything. I mean, it's on me to screw this up because there's nothing I can't do. My lenses are endless, my ISO, my stops. I mean, I could shoot 20 stops all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's really great.
Yeah, that part of it has all been really, really good. I love all the evolution of the technique that's coming. Even these crazy backgrounds that you're hearing about, these
the giant digital boards. They just they turn on
the LED screens, and there's a name for it.
I know
I just heard about it, but you project this 3D landscape onto it, and as the camera moves, it'll move. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff. So you're just dialing in whatever you want. I mean, you got to learn how to shoot against that,
right?
But at the same time, now that's coming in, and they're lighting with those effects and stuff. It can just start to look more realistic,
What was one of your favorite jobs during your time? What was one that you look back now and go, man, I can't believe they paid us to do that. That was so much fun.
I would have to say all of the Yeti jobs, because not only was it Wyman, but we did Jim Shockey.
Yes.
He's a famous game hunter. Mm-hmm. And then we did Flip. We did a lot of rodeo stuff, big bulls in Texas, or that was Oklahoma actually. But that kind of stuff was always my favorite. But the best, I guess the best job, I'm trying to think, it probably would have had to have been ExxonMobil, where we went and ended up going all the way to Chad, Africa, to shoot there. And that was just a trippy experience.
Wow.
And the other thing was we were shooting their oil platforms, like out in North Atlantic. So we were doing helicopter mounts and hanging out the side of helicopters to film their oil platforms, and just crazy ass stuff like that. I don't know if you remember the old Tyler mounts, they called them, where you'd be on the side. Most of the time it was like God, I haven't used a helicopter in so long. I forget what they called them. But anyway, you had the side door, and you had this Tyler mount, and it was a platform that was mounted to the bottom of the floor in the helicopter. And when it came time to shoot, you'd slide the door open and you'd push out. You slide out on this mount where the camera was already mounted.
Okay.
And you had these like gunner handles on your for zoom and shoot and stuff like that. And you're literally like gunning out the side of the helicopter of these things. And I remember this job, we were out in the North Atlantic, and we were in this like Super Puma helicopter. Money was no object for ExxonMobil, so they had this like Delta Force helicopter, and the producer had taken all the seats out of it. So we had this helicopter mount, and so we fly out there. It's about an hour and a half flight to the platform, and the guy goes, "Okay, we're here. Get ready to shoot." So slide open the door, and I go out on this mount, and I'm trying to hold on to the camera, and the director is looking at his monitor, and he's like, pan left. And I say to him, I can't. The helicopter blades are sucking me out. There was such a wind force out there that it was literally just sweeping the camera away. But I was all mounted in and safe.
Right, yeah.
But I could hardly pan. The propellers were just so forceful. It was hilarious. But you have to let the helicopter do all the work, so there shouldn't have been a lot of panning anyway. But it was just crazy like that.
Well, so when you went to Chad, is that where you took some of the portraits that are on your website when you were in Chad, Africa?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So we were in the. It was a story about their malaria prevention work. So it started in the labs in Boston, Mass, and stuff like that, and then we went all the way to Chad, where they would distribute these mosquito and malaria prevention for all of their workers who were working on the pipeline.
It says you shot it on a Leica M6 on Tri-X.
Correct.
Wow. That's
yeah.
You were working hard, man. You were getting your National Geographic roots on.
I told you, I'm just like, I fancy myself one of these reportage photographers.
Your inner James Knockway was going full force there.
Yeah. Oh, I love the old cameras. I have a Leica M6. I have a collection of Hasselblad still, 4x5. I still like shooting film.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So. Yeah.
I mean that M6. That's a treasure. You can't.
I still have it.
Yeah.
I still have it.
You can't go.
I'll never get rid of it.
Yeah.
So.
When were you shocked by that bird in the sky, the drone? That's another thing that came into play for the man with the stills in the video, the drone camera. Was that something when you saw, you were like, what the hell?
Yeah, the drones came, they came in pretty quickly. Of course, I just thought it was really, really cool. The first drones that I worked with were those monster beasts, and the only operators that you could get were the hobbyists, the enthusiasts, the ones who were in the sporting events of
racing,
the obstacle courses or speed or stuff like that, and they would have like 6 or 8 props on them. You had to give them a 25-foot radius, a takeoff, and all this kind of stuff. And they were heavy and cumbersome, and the batteries went out so quickly, and they would never perform in bad weather and, stuff like that. So they would show up on rare occasion, and they would have a very specific use on a commercial. But then when they started getting smaller and lighter, and we ended up having a very, very good drone operator with us, Jimmy Chappie, and he became really highly skilled at this, and he got into the smaller drone stuff and became really good. That we shot one commercial with, let's say the drone was going to be setting camera work, ended up getting everything on the commercial because he was so good, and the client just loved seeing his locations from up above.
Right.
It didn't matter what we shot down below. He just loved seeing it up above. So everything was from the drone. I went, oh God.
You guys and your
job
sticks.
Killers. Yeah. So
you and your dolly.
Job killers, But we started getting really creative with it. We could do things like starting out inside an interior of a location and be able to pull back outside. He would take over the drone. I would hold it, let's say.
Right.
get all the material inside, and then it'd be small enough, and I'd have a helmet on or something like that. But then as I raise it, he'd start it up and then just take it from me and get these beautiful exterior aerials all in one shot. So that it added another element to the motion and stuff like that. But yeah, they'll be around for like forever.
Yeah. It's I got a buddy that's a drone professor here in Fullerton, and I help him with a drone film festival, and the stuff I've seen over the last 5 years, just the 5 years increments, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
These kids are making stuff that, I mean, I saw a skateboard, just, skateboard videos have been skateboard videos for years, but now they're doing it on the drone. And it's like, holy crap, dude, kid's doing a kick flip, and the drone's going in between the board as he's going by. And you're like, you've only got like 2 inches in between. And it's like, holy crap. And you're like,
they must be using the goggles or something. I don't know. I've seen some amazing things on that, but the more the merrier.
Yeah.
The quality is great, and
it's an
the
added
video
tool.
quality wasn't great in the beginning, but now it's like,
Oh yeah, now they're dragging reds around, so it's totally fine.
Yeah, right.
Jesus.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you start to feel like you were going to slow down? Like it was getting near the time for Mark to retire?
Yeah. Well, again, it's not like really, really retiring, but I always wanted a second career at this in the shooting still, but I wanted to do something else. And, I wasn't as enthusiastic about the travel anymore. It was getting to be, being on an airplane now is a lot different than what it used to be. Mm-hmm. It used to be quite an adventure to the whole process, getting to the airport, getting on an airplane, landing and stuff like that. Now it's just, it's a cattle drive at the airport, all that. So that I wasn't enjoying that part. Just living in hotels all the time. One commercial after another. I'm not necessarily saying I have to have big budgets to work, but the budgets were getting really, really small. You were starting to be asked to do a lot more than what you should be doing, in a sense, taking on more roles that other people used to do. The main thing was, can I wake up every morning feeling the same way I did about shooting 20 years ago as today? And if the answer is no, not really, I'm just getting a paycheck, then, maybe it's time.
Right.
It's not fair to the people you're with. It's, that kind of thing. So I just, so I picked Ecuador because of the cost of living and the lifestyle. I grew up in South America when my father was stationed there. So I had a passion for South America as a place. And
where was he stationed in South America?
Bolivia and Peru.
Interesting.
So, yeah. He worked at the embassies. There wasn't a military base there or anything like that. He worked at the embassy. So that's how we got there. But so anyway, I decided to go to Ecuador, and I thought, let me go down there. I'll probably get bored not doing anything, come back to the States and take that occasional job. But I got down there, and it was like, I didn't want to go back. There wasn't anything really pulling me back, missing this job, missing that job. I was just having fun starting up all these new things there.
I mean, I
You
looked
know?
up the town you live in, and it's it's gorgeous.
Oh, there's 450,000 people, I think. It's a World Heritage Site city, so there's a lot of great architecture. There's 4 rivers that run through it. You're surrounded by mountains. You know, I go mountain biking.
You're not that far from the ocean, too.
It's about 4 hour drive to the Pacific.
Okay.
And it's less to the Amazon. I'm in what they call the Sierras, which is the mountains.
Right.
So that's where the Andes are. And so it'd be like living in Telluride, I think, something like that. 8,500 feet altitude.
Ooh.
So it's not so high where, you feel it a little bit, but it's not debilitating.
Yeah, but I bet when you come back to sea level, you feel like a super athlete.
One way or the other, I haven't felt that different yet.
Okay.
When we first went to Quito, and that's 10,000 feet, and that's where you really start to feel it, in that. And I was huffing and puffing it one day going up this street, and I finally stopped and had to catch my breath. And I look over and there's this like 100-year-old Inca woman just marching right past me. Like it's, just a stroll in the park for her. But
she patted you on the butt as she walked by you?
Yeah, exactly.
You young yipper snapper.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So I just got lucky. I found myself in a really good situation down there with a really great group of young Ecuadorians. They're enthusiastic about film photography, so that gets me jazzed. It's a
cool.
healthy photo community. There's a lot of photographers down there, a lot of artists. Everybody supports each other. It seems like I've only been down there 10 months now.
Okay.
And it just seems, the way of life is nice and easy. And, the cost of living is really, really low.
How's the language barrier?
Well, traveling around the world, most people know a little bit of English,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same down there. So they'll study a little English in school, so everybody has a little bit of knowledge of English. But I'm trying to learn as fast as I can.
Right.
Being down there, I know a little bit. I can go to the market. I can order from a restaurant. I can kind of tell what's going on in a conversation, but I feel like, by not knowing a language, you don't get the sense of humor. You don't get the real nuances of what the country's about and stuff like that. So I'm eager to learn.
So you're diving in both feet trying to get that.
I'm diving in both feet for sure.
I gotta believe it's gotta help being there. You're immersed in it, and so you're gonna have no choice but to pick this up to be a member.
Yeah. Well, we have a condo there in the city, but my girlfriend talked me into renting this space in one of those old patrimonial houses that are downtown Centro. So I go down every day. I'm right in the heart of it. There's a lab right there. That's where the gallery is, where I have my show. So I have a little office there with my printer and computer, and I'm there with all the people that kind of come in and out of the facility to get their film processed, or there's a cafe there, so they come in and get a coffee. So yeah, I try and keep myself involved in it every day. So I'm not just sitting at home trying to find American channels on TV, Like I hear a lot of people go down there to retire just to do that, but no, I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, especially if you got something to offer the young community, and
Right.
guide them and give them some experience and lay it on them. Absolutely.
And they're so interested, and they're so amazed just to have a different somebody with a different experience,
Right.
And
a different eye,
So,
the way you look
yeah.
at things.
Yeah, exactly.
So if somebody's wandering around Ecuador, they should stop by and see the gallery.
They should. They should.
Where are they going to find it? Where do they got to go?
New. Well, it's the house. They call it Icaro House. The name of the gallery, let me see if I can remember, is because it's brand new. It's Thalia, Thalia is the name of the gallery. Anyway, it's on Gran Colombia in Cuenca, and the cross street is Tarqui.
Okay.
1225 Gran Colombia at Tarqui in Cuenca.
Boy, when you get home, there's going to be a line out front waiting, people waiting to get in.
Actually, the show just ended on this trip. The show ended. So it was something I ended up, this is amazing. Everything seems to be coming together. It was my first ever photography show. It was their first ever gallery. This is like my first interview. I'm serious.
It's all happening.
This is the first time I've talked for more than an hour straight, I think. A lot of firsts going on in my life.
What did you show in the gallery? What did you show? What did you present?
We did a story for the Salvation Army in Haiti a couple years after the earthquake. The Salvation Army had started a program of offering people in need small business loans to either jumpstart their business or restart or get a little ahead. And that could be like somebody wanted to just start a coffee roasting company or a mechanic shop, teaching apprentice and stuff like that. So we went down there to tell that story. And at that point, I always carried a camera around with me, and we incorporated stills into that documentary. So I came back with what I thought was a pretty strong series of pictures. So I showed that.
Wow.
So I showed the Haiti stuff.
That's cool.
Sorry, my earplugs are gonna.
It's all right. We're almost done. What I
can hear you.
What I want you to leave me with is some advice for some students. What advice would you give people?
I always say show up early and stay late. I mean, you just got to be in it and be a part of it, be aware of your surroundings. For me, the biggest thing was really telling myself, listen, it's not all about me. This job is not going to fall short just because of me. So if I stick with the team, we're all going to be a success. If I believe in the people I'm working with, we're going to be successful. And it's always turned out to be that way.
That's awesome. That's great advice. That's great advice. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough for your time. I've been an admirer of your work. I'm glad we were able to connect. This is awesome. I mean, you've made some unbelievable images, and you still are, and I'm glad you're still banging away doing it, man. Even if you're in South America.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be in the middle of everything, to do your thing. I've found more inspiration down there than anything I was finding when the last few years I was living in Austin.
Oh, yeah. It's got to be
just, if you keep things new and fresh and stuff like that, you can't help but be inspired all the time,
Right. Well, I might be in Peru in June, so I'm going to give you a call because we're working on a project.
Well, we're next door neighbors, but we're not that close.
But if I need a DP, I know a guy on the continent.
You can call me. Yeah, you might be able to pull me out of retirement.
It's just a little puddle jumper away, right? It can't be that far.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can't be union anymore.
That's
I retired from the union.
Ah, good. Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
you keep working, man. Keep doing your stuff. Where can people find your work? If they want to follow you, are you pretty active on Instagram?
I'm active on Instagram. I'm at Mark Thomas DP
Okay.
at how does that? No, it's Mark Thomas DP, right?
Yeah, Mark Thompson DP. Because markthompson.com is your website.
At Mark Thomas DP.
Right.
That's the Instagram one. And my website is markmthomas.com.
Okay.
Don't forget the middle initial.
Right.
markmthomas.com. And I got to update my website, but Instagram is usually pretty current.
Yeah, I bet you got some beautiful stuff from that country. That is a gorgeous place you're at. You lucky dog.
Yeah,
Mark,
it's pretty nice.
You're the best. Thank you so much for this, man. I do absolutely appreciate it.
Great talking to you, Matt.
All right.
Everybody should do this. It's been great talking to you.
Well, all right. I'm going to have everybody on.
Well, I was going to say, I would encourage anybody you're thinking about, I would encourage them to talk to you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, I'm going to have you run my PR firm then.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
All right. Thank you, man.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Mark. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and become a subscriber to the podcast. You can follow the Just a Good Conversation podcast on Instagram, and you can find all of our past shows on the website at justagoodconversation.com. Thank you for listening.